Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Penn Vicarage on this lovely sunny Tuesday morning. Lovely to see you. Thank you so much for joining us, and hope you find our morning talk helpful for this morning. Friends, we are, as you know, we're continuing our adventure through the amazing book of Psalms, and today we're in Psalm 130. Remind you, as I always do, for the context, we're in book 5 of the 5 books of Psalms, and we're part. This is one of what they call Song of Ascents, which means song of going up, basically, and psalms which were used by pilgrims on their way to Jerusalem for the great pilgrimage. What I think is interesting, if you look at them all, they're all sort of about 7 or 8 verses long. They're all quite short. I suppose little psalms would be quite easy to carry on, little scrolls, perhaps on the way to Jerusalem, that kind of thing. I don't know, I'm speculating now. But it's Psalm 130. It's another lovely little, beautiful little psalm. So without further ado, I'll read the text to you. Psalm 130. Out of the depths I cry to you, O Lord. Lord, hear my voice. Let your ears be attentive to the voice of my supplications. If you, O Lord, should mark iniquities, Lord, who could stand? But there is forgiveness with you, so that you may be revered. I wait for the Lord. My soul waits. In his word I hope. My soul waits for the Lord more than those who watch for the morning, more than those who watch for the morning. O Israel, hope in the Lord, for with the Lord there is steadfast love, and with him there is great power to redeem. It is he who will redeem Israel from all its iniquities. And this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Okay, another little psalm, this one. Interestingly, all these songs of ascents, they're all quite short. There's 14 of them, from 120 to 134. They're all quite different, and they all give a slightly different take. So you can imagine people on the pilgrimage going through like a spiritual journey as well as a physical journey. And this morning is another part of that journey, another take on it this morning. Now, Psalm 130 essentially is in 2 parts. This is verses 1 to 6, and there's 7 to 8. You can spot it because 1 to 6 is essentially its personal thing. Whoever wrote it, we don't know. It's a talk to God, and then verses 7 to 8 is almost like saying to Israel, almost like it's giving a message to everybody else. So the verses 1 to 6 are essentially talking sort of between him and God, and then verse 7 to 8. Really is talking to the people, telling them that there's forgiveness with God. So 1 to 6 is the first bit, and 7 to 8 is kind of the second bit. First is the personal bit, then there's the bit to the people around him. So what's going on? Well, verse 1 essentially sets the scene. Basically, this guy is in deep trouble. He talks about out of the depths. You might say he's got into deep water. You might, but that's the kind of thing that's going on here. Got into deep water. And deep water really means, again, deep water, it's a bit like the sea. It means kind of chaos. It's kind of code for metaphysical chaos, if you like. I've just got everything's become too much. And every time you hear deep water or sea or that type of thing, it's code for kind of chaos. So when the Spirit brooded over the waters in Genesis chapter 1, and God brought order out of chaos. Likewise, when Jesus stilled the storm on the lake, it was the disciples had literally got themselves into deep water, and Jesus stilled the storm and got them out of it. And that's the kind of picture you've got going here. Out of deep water, I cry to you, O Lord. So this guy's got himself into deep trouble. He's out of and kind of feel this as well. He got himself into deep water, and so out of the deep water, he says, "Lord, hear my voice." Might be another way of putting it. Essentially, that's what he's saying. He's got himself into deep trouble. And if you read, and like I said, it's very, very personal, and so you can just kind of feel the depths of what's really going on. He's got himself into deep doo-doo, you might say. But interesting here, the trouble he's got into, and really the trouble here is guilt. That's what essentially he's got into in Psalm 130. This isn't, you don't get the impression he's surrounded by enemies or that kind of thing. This isn't David surrounded by Saul or anything like that. The trouble he's got into here is one of guilt, and we don't know what he's done. This is one of 6 what are called penitential psalms. Psalm 51 being another one, that type of thing. I think Psalm 6 is as well. Whole series where it comes to God to say sorry, and it's actually a very important thing that we need to do as well. So this is a penitential psalm, and he's got himself in deep trouble, if you like, of his own making. And it's interesting in verse 3, if you, O Lord, should mark iniquities, Lord, who should stand? And I suppose St. Paul would put it, all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. Romans chapter 3, verse 23. And it does remind us, of course, that all of us have sinned. And we forget it sometimes. We act as if God somehow owes us a favour, and we do this and we do that and we do the other and so on. But actually, all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. And Psalm 130 is absolutely right. You know, if your Lord should mark iniquities, Lord, who should stand? You know, if God held everything against us, if God kind of remembered everything like that against us, then really, we'd all be in trouble, wouldn't we? So, in a sense, a bit like Romans 3:23, all sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. And so the psalmist, out of the trouble he's in, says, Lord, if you, O Lord, would mark iniquities, who would stand? But then he goes on to say, there's forgiveness with you so that you may be revered. And it's quite interesting here because it's interesting what comes first. Here, there is forgiveness with you so that you may be revered. In other words, the forgiveness comes first. And because the person has been forgiven, therefore they revere, they fear God. So it's not that we fear God and revere God and therefore God forgives us. God forgives us first. And because we are forgiven, therefore we trust in God. And I think there's a vital message here. We don't earn God's forgiveness. God forgives us, and therefore we respond in kind. And I think that there's a lovely phrase in a church in Warsaw which says, you cannot outgive God. The way it works is God forgives us, and out of God's grace, out of God's mercy, we are forgiven. And because of that, we serve God, not the other way around. A lot of people, a lot of Christians act as if I do enough good things, if I can clock up enough heaven points, God might like me for it. It's the absolute opposite. It's God forgives us first, and therefore we serve God. As verse 4 says, but there is forgiveness with you, so that you may be revered. And then he goes on, I wait for the Lord, my soul waits. Feel it. In his word is my hope. And he goes on, more than those who watch for the morning. And he repeats it, more than those who watch for the morning. When the Bible repeats something, that's code for this is really important. So feel here the longing that the psalmist has for God. He's absolutely desperate for God. He longs more than someone waits for the morning. God, the psalmist here waits for God. And so he says, I wait for the Lord. My soul waits. In his word is my hope. And I think actually we need to be forgiven. The Book of Common Prayer puts it so well in I think it's in Ebersol. I know it's in the communion service where you feel the kind of the weight carrying all this burden around. And the psalmist is saying, hey, I'm longing for God. I need God's forgiveness. I need God's hope in my heart. And as I say, as a watchman waits for the morning, so I long for God. And then finally, in verses 7 and 8, he then turns it from talking to God to the people around him. And he says, Israel, hope in the Lord. Because with the Lord, there is steadfast love. And with him is great power to redeem. So he says, I have discovered the forgiveness of God. I know the forgiveness of God. And therefore, my friends, turn to God. Because with God, you'll find steadfast love. With God, you'll find forgiveness. Because, how will him put it? His blood can make the foulest clean. His blood availed for me. So, another beautiful little psalm, starting with the psalmist in deep doo-doo, in deep waters, and out of the depths of the waters he's in, he cries to God, Lord, be attentive. He talks to God very personally. Then he goes on to say, all I've sinned, oh Lord, if you, Lord, mark iniquity, who would stand? All have sinned and fallen short of God. God, if you held anything against us, we wouldn't stand a chance, because we all know that we're sinners. But there's forgiveness with you. And because there's forgiveness, therefore we will revere you. And then he goes on to say, I wait for the Lord. And again, feel the longings. It's what as someone would say, it's visceral. It's really heartfelt. I wait for the Lord. My soul wait. He's really longing for the God more than someone waits for the morning. And because he finds forgiveness, he turns it around to his friends and says, Israel, trust in the Lord. Because in the Lord, there's forgiveness. In the Lord, there is steadfast love. And the message to us today, my friends, is in the Lord, there is hope. In the Lord, there's forgiveness. Whatever we've done, whatever we haven't done, we can find forgiveness in him. Bless you, my friends. Have a lovely Tuesday. Enjoy the rest of the day. Enjoy the sunshine. Thank you for watching. Do please share these messages with your friends. See if we can get to lots of other people can enjoy watching them as well. Thanks for watching. Have a lovely day, and God bless.